This episode is brought to you by Annette, George, James, and Robert, this week's newest patrons. We've spent a lot of time helping you guys decide what to buy in different price points, and we will get back to that next week, I promise. But in the meantime, this week we're talking about sort of the same subject from a different point of view. Mine. For the last few weeks, I've been talking, emailing, texting, FaceTiming with patrons, as I do, and one in particular I want to talk about today. We're going to call him Kyle, because his name's Kyle. Hi, Kyle. Anyway, Kyle is boat shopping right now with sort of a price point in mind. He's a bit flexible, and while I've been answering his questions and hopefully helping as much as I can, he did ask me an interesting question this morning in our usual 6:30 a.m. exchange. What would I do? The episodes I make for Lady K Sailing are largely to help other people, so it's very rare that I offer my personal opinion on any of these subjects. You guys often praise me on this channel for my sort of no-nonsense, fact-based kind of approach, so it's rare that I actually put my own spin on it. There's no sponsors and nobody's paying me to say these things. But this week, I'm going to indulge myself a little bit, and I'm going to answer Kyle's question. What would I do? Which boat would I choose if I was shopping right now, and why? Now, my plans are likely the same as most of yours. We want to go cruising long-term in the Caribbean, probably, in comfort and safety, hopefully without breaking the bank. Now, obviously, I've already been cruising, which you can see on this channel if you start at, I think, about episode 18. You can click right there. And I've also been on hundreds of boats, both cruising and racing, not to mention the library full of research stuck in my tiny brain from doing this channel, from making these episodes. So I think I'm in a good spot to make a decision. But first, a disclaimer. This episode is opinion-based, and it's what I think is best for me, and only me. I think the boat you buy should be entirely driven by what you plan to use it for. You might be an ocean crosser, you might be headed for the Arctic to explore and find icebergs, you might be a thrill seeker, and you might be headed to Cape Horn. Or you might be like me, spending the latter half of your life untied from the norm, not playing the usual game of life, and instead trading in your worldly possessions and the potential for a fat bank account, instead for experiences and travel and meeting amazing people in amazing places. The boat that I own, the one I cruise on, is Lady K. She's a 35-foot Hughes, and I've been down the rabbit hole and back on what exactly would I replace her with if I was going to replace her. And ultimately that'll probably happen, but it comes down to sort of two trains of thought for me. And I'm going to call them the Battleship or the floating Condo. And neither nickname really does either boat any justice, but it'll do. For the Battleship option, I'm going to use the legendary Island Packet 380, the 38, as my example boat. Now, you can get one of these things for $150,000 to $200,000 in good nick, and it'll take you literally anywhere, in any weather. And if one of these things meets a shipping container at sea, my money's on the Island Packet. The counter argument I'll be making is going to be done with the Catalina 42 Mark II. That's going to be our floating condo for this example. This is a production style boat, and you can pick one up for about $100,000. Now, before you get mad at me and start firing away at all caps in the comments, I'm going to point out right now, the Island Packet is a better boat. It's heavier, it's thicker, it's safer, it's more comfortable in a gale, and it will last for 1,000,000 years. It's also rightfully more expensive. Now, I could cruise on either one for what my plans are. Either one is going to get the job done just fine. So which one is actually right for me? And I ask this question, and I make this episode today to sort of make a point. Every sailor is going to tell you to buy the Island Packet. They just will. It's a better sailboat. But what if a sailboat isn't all that you're after? I mean, we talk about sailboats till we're blue in the face around here, but this channel is a cruising channel. It was founded when I started filming cruising. So what if you're going to spend your time cruising? And by that, I mean 95% of your time is going to be on board, but simply living on board, maybe working on board, showering and sleeping on board. The other 5% of the time, sure, you're going to be sailing from tropical paradise to tropical paradise. So the Island Packet 380 is an exceptional boat. At 21,000 pounds and a full keel, she is designed specifically for long-term offshore cruising and handling the worst the weather has to offer. These boats are overbuilt in every sense, from the layup and the thickness of the hull to the rig and all the standing rigging. It is meant to take punishment year after year. The 380 has a 13-foot beam, so it's roomy inside, and most people, and I'm one of these people, once you get inside an Island Packet, you swear it's 5 feet longer than it actually is because of the space inside. It's really this weird effect that those boats have when you walk in. It's also more of a traditional style, old-fashioned if you will, sort of a boat, offering you that old-world, rock-solid world traveler look, but in more of a modern boat. The Island Packet 380's mast is also keel-stepped, and it's rigged as a cutter, so you get extra sail area and balance to charge across the ocean on a stable and comfortable platform that will absolutely freight train its way through the water when it's on a reach. This boat is built to do this stuff, and it's the perfect boat for it. I love this boat, I really do. For under $200,000, you'd be really hard-pressed to find something that is this capable and this strong while being this comfortable. She really is the Battleship. But she's not an uncomfortable battleship. You get a wide saloon with benches on either side and a drop table in the middle to sort of bring it all together at dinner time. You get a V-berth that is leaps and bounds better than the conventional V-berth, because this one has a centerline bed. You can actually get in and out of this thing on either side without waking your spouse up in the middle of the night. You also get a galley that's fairly big, and the head is huge. Not only can you shower in there, but you could probably run around if you wanted to. If you don't want to sleep in that nice V-berth, which some people don't because it does tend to get a little bit bouncy up at the front of the boat if you're in a rough anchorage, you also get a private aft cabin with enough room to be comfortable. Lady K Sailing is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode. To make this whole channel possible, I really couldn't do it without you. If you'd like to help out the channel, please consider becoming a patron. Now, if we flip the coin from the Battleship over to the floating Condo and talk about that, our example boat for that is going to be the Catalina 42 Mark II. Definitely the Mark II. This is a production style boat, and it comes in a range of flavors, but we're going to specifically be looking at the 2-stateroom with the centerline owner's berth in the front, because that's the one I think would best suit my personal needs. Now, the Catalina is 500 pounds lighter than the Island Packet, but it's a few feet longer. So you know it just isn't as thick or as heavily built. It just can't be. But she gets an extra foot on the beam, which translates to more space inside, of course. She won't be an ocean-crossing cutter rig like the IP either, so you'll have to settle for a plain old double-spreader sloop. And this is a more modern style of boat, so you can expect to have an in-mast main furler, which is nice, and it makes it easier to live with on the day-to-day. You also get more space in the cockpit to spread out and be comfortable while you're underway. The mast on this boat, however, is deck-stepped, which is a bit less secure, well, much less secure, than a keel-stepped mast like the Island Packet has. So on the Catalina, if you were to say, lose a stay, there's a much better chance that you're going to lose the whole rig. But you get a more simplistic rig, which makes it easier to step it up and down if you need to, and it makes it easier to replace the rigging if you're a DIY kind of person. The Catalina also gives you more hatches and port lights to let the light in and the air flow through, and you can expect everything to be led aft on the Catalina right from the factory with coach top controls, so you rarely ever have to leave the cockpit on this boat. You just unfurl both sails with their furling lines and you sit back and trim. Inside is where we really start to see the difference between these two boats. The Catalina gives you a huge saloon with a wraparound couch to port and a bench and a desk to work at on starboard. Now, I really like this because I'm obviously going to spend a lot of time editing videos while I travel, and that seat looks particularly comfortable. Up front in the Catalina, you get the same sort of centerline bed in the V-berth that you got in the Island Packet, so no real advantage there. And you also get the luxury of a nice aft cabin too. But where the Island Packet has to make do with just one head, the Catalina gets two. And I have to admit, this is strictly a luxury item. I don't need two bathrooms. I can't imagine why you'd want two bathrooms unless you have guests on board. Whatever, it's got two. The Catalina, however, gives you some quality of life things that the Island Packet just doesn't. Like, you get a sugar scoop with a walk-through transom, with more room on the back for dinghy davits and solar panels, and those things are important to me. Some of you may not care about that stuff, but I've spent too long lugging groceries and water over the stern rail. I really don't want to do that again. Lastly, many of you guys know that I have a bit of a need for speed when it comes to sailing, and I club race a lot. Actually, today's Thursday, it's a race night, and if the weather holds off, I'm going racing. And maybe I'll show you guys sometime what I'm crewing on this year. Anyway, being a better racer is an important factor for me when I'm choosing a boat. And while the Island Packet is a better long-distance sort of ocean crossing long-term sailboat, the difference in the around the mark performance between these two boats is staggering. We can tell a lot by a boat by its PHRF rating, which basically tells us how fast it goes. That's a whole different episode and we're not going to get into it, but suffice it to say, the Catalina is significantly faster for the type of sailing that I tend to do. And I don't just mean racing. When I was out cruising, that's the type of sailing I did. It was more tacking back and forth and point as high as you can to get where you're going in less tacks. The Catalina's rating is around 100 to the Island Packet's 168. Now, what that means is in a mile, the Battleship, or the IP, should be more than a minute slower per mile, 68 seconds slower per mile to be exact. So in a heads-up race around the club course that I race right now is 6 miles. The Catalina would show up at the finish line 6 whole minutes before the Island Packet. And that may not seem like a lot, 6 minutes, who cares? But tacking around the Bahamas, up and down into the wind and around shoals and different things, which is the kind of sailing you do down there, on say a 60-mile day, which isn't unheard of, that would net the Catalina a better spot in the anchorage than the Island Packet would get, because the Catalina would be there an hour sooner. Also on the performance side, the Catalina has a fin keel, so she's going to outpoint the Island Packet upwind by a lot. Now, which would I rather cross the ocean on? You guys know, it's the Island Packet every single time. Which would I rather sail in more normal conditions, in the type of sailing that I do 99.9% of the time? I think the Catalina has to take the cake on that one by a lot. For my plans, island hopping the Caribbean, spending a month here, a month there, livability, and the space that I need to make and edit videos, that's what I'm after. I also don't want to be the slowest boat when we jump from island to island in the sailboat convoy. Of course, I may cross an ocean someday, but for right now, what I need is that 95% of the time simply living on the boat to be as comfortable and happy and functional as I can for the money. Now, I could do it on the Island Packet quite happily, but the Catalina 42 just gives me more of what I'm going to do, and for a lot less money. Disclaimer, this Catalina and this Island Packet are not my dream boats by any means, but I made this episode to make that point. Buy what suits your goals, not what the people on YouTube say and not what the sailors say, which is a better sailboat. What suits you? Mine is island hopping, and 95% of the time, the floating condo is actually going to suit me a lot better than the Battleship. What suits you best? Those are my thoughts, not yours. Next week, we're back to our regularly scheduled program. Where are we at? 60 grand? 70 grand? We've got to talk about Tartan and Tiana. Until then, I will see you guys next week.